Welcome back to the Untrained Outdoorsman podcast. And as always, I'm your host, Jake Fleischman. And I just want to take a minute here and recognize all of our great partners who continue to make this podcast possible and support us. So I understand that some of you are going to want to just skip right to the episode. You can go right ahead and do that. Just skip ahead a few minutes and hope you enjoy this episode. For the rest of you who are still here, I want to just go down the list and recognize our great partners, and I'll throw up the discount codes that we offer as well. Don't worry, for those of you who are listening to the audio version, just look down in the description. The discount codes will be listed right underneath each partner. In no particular order: Hunter's Blend Coffee, Osseo Gear, Rec Broadheads, Catalyst Archery, the Amsteel Guy, and Hunt Arsenal. So those are the list of our great partners. Like I said, if you're watching the video version, you can see on the screen the discount code that we offer. If you go on their website and make an order, use that discount code, and then it just shows them that we sent you their way. And that's a great way to keep this podcast growing and letting us continue to do what we do. So I appreciate you just sticking around for a couple minutes, and I appreciate all of our partners, like I said, but more importantly, I really appreciate every listener and all the support that you give us, the feedback, the dislikes, the likes, everything. We appreciate it, and you guys are the real reason that we do this and want to put out good content for you. So I appreciate you sticking around and listening to my little spiel, but that's all I got, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit, maybe late season, post-rut type stuff. I know, like we talked about, most seasons are wrapping up. For us, we're pretty well done. We both are done. There's some states still open in the South, but I guess I kind of want to just touch on maybe your approach, and we can get into maybe my approach later in the year. I know I don't really typically hunt much late season just because it's kind of tough going, and it's something that I strive to get better at, I guess. But it's like the one part of the season or the one phase of the season I really want to get better at, just because some years you're going to have a rough year and you're still going to have tags in your pocket come, mid-late December, later in the year. So I don't know what your thoughts are as far as when you consider late season. Like it's probably different for everybody depending on what state you're hunting and where your season lines up. Here in Wisconsin, like after our rifle season and like once firearms are done, I kind of consider that late season just because that's when all the pressure comes in, and kind of after that, it's kind of goes the other way. Not many guys are out there. The ones that are usually guys that are hunting private land who have like a couple big bucks still showing up, a little bit more cookie cutter scenarios where, they can sit in an enclosed stand and sit over a cornfield or a food plot or something like that they put in on public land late season, especially here where there's snow and a lot of snow. It makes it kind of tough. But I just kind of wanted to maybe hear your thoughts a little bit on what you consider late season and maybe your initial approach. Let's say hypothetically you have no tags filled through gun season, which is not a kind of a rarity because it's not that hard to fill tags during rifle season, in my opinion here. But let's just say hypothetically you have your archery tag still in your pocket post rifle season here, for example, and what your approach would be and kind of your thoughts on how you'd maybe break it down.
So I kind of consider late season the same. We got the 10-day gun season. Or is it
9 or
9 day?
10, yeah.
And then right after that rolls into muzzleloader season. So you got essentially 2.5, 3 weeks of pressure in the woods during gun season. And then right after that, there's a 4-day antlerless hunt. That pushes you into middle of December and the 4-day amateur hunt, you can't, even if you have an archery tag, you still can't hunt for a buck. You can shoot a doe with a bow, but so you're in the middle of December before you can even get back in the woods and try to get on whatever buck you really want to shoot. But late season, especially here after gun season, the deer are, for the most part, herded up. Rut activity is very minimal. You still have some fawns that are coming into heat. So you'll see a little bit of that. The peak and everything's kind of over. For the most part, you're just wanting to look for I'm fortunate enough. We do have private land. There are standing cornfields still on it, but that doesn't mean that our cornfield is better than a cornfield half mile away, because just having cameras on it right now, there's a handful of does and fawns, but we really haven't had any bucks show up. And then I go along the highway on some cornfields and even some alfalfa that's peeking through the snow, and there's deer, 60, 70 deer in each field. So finding the preferred food source, I think, is the best. Now, if you're in, say, some land that's not near any crop fields, really, you're going to be wanting to look for, if there are those acorns, see if they're scratching around in that. Really, I'm just trying to find the most tracks and most condensed areas where I'm finding deer sign.
Yeah, I feel like and I don't have a lot of, like I said, I need to be better about just being in the woods, even if I've filled my tags like this time of year and kind of trying to figure out what deer are doing. But you kind of said it. The deer, for the most part, maybe some mature bucks here and there are still, out searching. Those are the ones that are probably going to get those late does. But I can think of specifically here, I drive past this field every day and I can tell that this land is owned by someone who doesn't hunt, doesn't allow hunting, because just the sheer amount of deer out in this field every year, every night. And you can tell they're all grouped up. The does come out earlier. They're all on one end of the field. And then that last half an hour, there's a group of 5 or 6 bucks on the complete other side of the field, and they're all grouped up again. So like that's one thing about this late season time of year, which it's kind of feast or famine, and not everybody has snow. Like we'll talk about how snow can help you or hurt you or what have you later, but not a lot of places, especially like in the south, they never get snow. But when you find them deer later in the year, you find them and you're in them or you're not. So it's kind of easy to kind of go through, especially if you're looking for them property. You can kind of cross a lot out and focus on certain areas. And I don't think you have to worry as much as you do like early season, because they're used to pressure at this point in the year. I think you can kind of hunt a spot if you get into them pretty hard and hunt that spot over and over again late season and probably still have a chance at a buck. I don't think they're as spooky and sensitive as they may be earlier in the year. That's just my opinion. I really have no idea, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking based on things I've seen. And yeah, I was just kind of wanted to bring up, like, you're either in deer late season or you're out of them. So you kind of just have to focus where there's deer. I don't think they're necessarily, it's kind of like early season where they're still in that pattern. And I don't think necessarily the bucks are that far from the does. I just think they're together again. They're grouped back up together. But I don't think you necessarily have to find two completely different spots where the bucks versus the does are going to be. I think just the deer in general are fighting for that food source and are in those areas that they're not getting bothered for a reason. And there's only so many of those areas. So they're going to be there. I don't
Yeah.
think so those are just kind of some of my initial thoughts on later in the year
And I
on
don't
where you're
know
going to find deer.
if it's just because up here we have more snow and cold. If they herd up, I don't know if down south they kind of stay a little more spread out. But like up here, it's either, like you said, you're either in them or you're not, because they're at a preferred food source, and every deer within a few miles is going to be congregated somewhere around that, because a lot of times that's the only food, otherwise browse. But if the deer can travel, they're going to go to something a little bit better than browse, in my opinion, unless you get into big timber blocks where there is nothing. But
Yeah. And like you said earlier too, I I've kind of thrown out the whole, especially on public land, there's hardly any that you have standing crops when you're talking public land, or even most areas like up north in the bigger woods, and even here in some areas, there's not any ag adjacent to public land or big pieces of ground that I hunt. So you kind of have to, everybody says, oh, standing corn or cut corn or beans or whatever have you, all this ag stuff. That's what you think about, but I don't have that. So I'm still trying to kind of figure out what deer prefer in this area for natural browse different times a year. And then I kind of wanted to talk about too, relating to that. It kind of depends their food source on how much snow you have. Because you mentioned acorns. I feel like that's way more prevalent when there's like a little bit of snow or no snow versus if there's 3 feet. I mean, it might be something different, something that's some kind of woody browse that's grows up through or taller, that they can get to even when
yeah,
there's 3 feet of snow. So like it's just little stuff like that that I think about that I don't know for sure, but it'd be something to have to like back up and
I
almost
think,
take inventory year to year on different conditions, what they kind of prefer to be able to help you cut down where you're going to focus.
yeah. And up here, a lot, you get a lot of snow. The deer kind of yard up in popple slashings or like fresh log cuts, because there's a lot of logging that goes on up here. So late season, that's pretty big in areas where there's not egg fields or something like that. We don't have, I think it's honeysuckle. They're like a real long pod. I seen them down in where we went on that little public land hunt.
I think
There
that's
was
honey
some down
locust.
there. Honey locust. Seen, there was another podcast I seen, and they were talking about that. But that was a more southern catered podcast.
Yeah,
Like,
you don't see those trees a lot around here, but when you do it, I've never confirmed or denied whether they hit them hard because it's just they're very rare here. But like locust trees, yeah, will drop those big long. It almost looks like a
big
freezed,
long,
like a dried banana.
yeah, or a big
Because
long bean or something. But I seen something somewhere on some podcast they were talking about when it freezes, they get real sugary, and that's the deer really just hammer on them.
yeah, I guess yeah, I've never really found enough of them to kind of be kind of cool to put like a find them early in the year and just throw a camera on them
Then
and
just
just
see what,
see when they kind of you know as far as food sources go, if you can figure out, they're gonna hit this at some point in the year and hang a camera on it and see like what time of year, it'd be kind of cool to do like a little
experiment.
inventory experiment that way. But it's kind of hard to burn a camera on something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think up north or in the bigger woods timber when they do a lot of logging, that'd be one thing I'd be keen in on. Just because especially fresh ones, those first 3 to 5 years, the first 5 years, when it's just you get a lot of shoots and a lot of little growths and stuff, it seems like they hit those pretty hard.
And it also serves as cover too, and they're able to hide in it. Not so much, they'll bed on the edges, but it's kind of like a little sanctuary from what I found.
Yeah, because later in the year, especially when rifle season comes in, those deer get pushed into areas where people are just not willing to go. That's just like one thing I've noticed is the spot can look really good for you as a rifle hunter, being wide open. Everybody caters to like an edge, like almost like an edge of a open clear cut or the edge of a field or all this areas where it's easy for you as the hunter to shoot maybe, and it's very wide open. But after the first day or two after opening weekend, those areas aren't very productive. It seems like those deer get pushed into areas where people don't go. They know from past years, or they just have that feeling, they're just going to stay there and then ride it out for 10 days. And then they kind of go back to their normal
Yeah.
feeding patterns after that. But you almost have to walk through those pockets and those thick spots where other people aren't willing to go to be able to find them because they kind of hole up in there.
Yeah. Well, that's like your driving's real big up here. If you get middle of the week and the deer shift off their normal patterns from archery season, a lot of guys are just pushing them swamps and cedar thickets and popple slashings and stuff. So deer drives are pretty prevalent, but that's rifle season, obviously.
Yeah, and if you're looking to do deer drives, that's like it's not easy. It's definitely makes it easier when there's snow, but if there was one, like, you just pretty much find a spot that's thick and you look at it, it's like, man, that looks nasty. Like, I don't really even want to walk in there. Probably a good spot to walk through and push because, I mean,
Odds are there's
probably deer
something.
in there.
Yeah.
And it's
And
really easy. Go ahead.
another thing to look at too, come late season, especially like on the western side of the state or real hill country wise, is you're like south facing slopes and stuff. If you get cold, them deer are going to want to be warm. They're going to want to be out of the wind. So if you don't really have a preferred food source narrowed down, you can kind of go off of, like topography and try to break a piece of land down that way. Figure out where they want to be bedding so they get sun all day, out of the wind. So you could have some success that way, just looking at that, cutting tracks, then kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together going off of that.
Yeah. And I don't know what every deer is probably different. I don't know what factors late season they prefer to or they take into consideration. Everybody says that food rules everything, which that might be true. But that's just kind of the thing everybody says. I don't know if that's true or not. But like we were saying, it depends on where you're at. A deer on a piece of private that has three different food plots that borders other private that has standing crops, like their preferred food source is going to be different from a deer that has lived in the same huge block of timber that there's no ag around. He's going to make do with whatever he's got. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they very well might relocate 5 miles to that ag, which I've seen happen, and it's pretty common, I think. Like all of us, I know on the private that I've ran cameras that all of a sudden, if you're the only crops within miles, like the years that we've had standing corn still this time of year, and they kind of just leave it. I know we draw deer from miles and miles and miles because you put up cameras along those crops, and you got 5, 10 times the deer you've had all year. I mean, you could take that into consideration. You could just play that game of getting in between that destination and where you think the deer are coming from, but then you play that game of how far are they really going to go. If they're trying to get to an area, they'll probably just relocate to that area and bed close to that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to pinpoint. I don't know. And and sometimes late season, some areas just might not be deer there. And it just probably takes you to walk that area this time of year and kind of figure that out. I think you can't force it. You can't force something that ain't there. You know,
Yeah.
there's certain pieces that have all the browse, all the cover early in the year when everything's green, and then later in the year, and especially after rifle season comes through and it maybe gets pushed out and it doesn't have any great food source on it. It was more cover based early season and they did have food there then. Now it just might be wide open, no cover, nothing really for them. You just kind of have to be okay with there not being deer there and go somewhere else.
Well, another thing, if you want to, if you're a guy that tends to hold on to their archery tag every year until late season for whatever factors you didn't get one or don't have the time and you run into it. You could also, like in the springtime, spring scouting, you can if you find sheds, you can kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. Okay, I'm finding sheds on a south facing slope or something. Okay, why are these deer there? Is there a crop field nearby? Is there old acorn drop? Is there a fresh cut down there? Why are these deer there? Then the following year, you can kind of go back on your inventory from spring. Okay, well, last year there was a bunch of deer here. They might be still using that. They might be in a complete different area, but it's worth having spots in mind come late season because it is more of a pain and harder to get on deer, especially if you're in areas where you get a bunch of snow. You're not going to be putting on the miles and stuff like you would early season or summer scouting. So you're kind of limited on how far you want to go. I mean, if you want to walk a long ways, you can, but most guys are not going to go as far come late season.
Yeah. And I was talking the one previous podcast that I did with his name's Lane. We did talk like muzzleloader hunting a little bit and how he approaches like firearm season, which I think can be like a sneaky good time. Muzzleloader season. You're kind of it's kind of hunting the same way. And we talked about how like late season, everybody's maybe burnt out from the year or, just kind of wants to take the easy road, especially with with a firearm, but that time of year and even late season, I feel like you could really get ahead by putting on the miles that you were putting on when you were all jacked up for the season. You're gung ho scouting before the season and early season when the weather's nice. Like when the weather's crappy and it's cold, I know I want to be warm. Like the easiest way to do that would just be putting on miles and walking. I think that's just like one way. And like we talked about, you gotta find those pockets where the deer are. You gotta just hop around. You gotta put on miles. You gotta find them, and once you do, then you can kind of play that slow game, and you can okay. I know there's deer here. Now I can take it a little bit slower and kind of focus here for a few days and throw some hunts at it, and then start getting strategic at that point. But this late in the year, I wouldn't be very cautious. I'd be blowing stuff up and walking spots until I'm jumping deer or finding deer, and
Yeah.
then kind of go from there. And that it's a lot easier to do that. And we can talk a little bit about snow and how that benefits someone too, because I feel like that's one way to be way more efficient later in the years when you got snow. It's hard when there's not snow or later in the year.
Yeah. Especially you get into gun season after opening weekend, you pretty much have to make something happen on your own. You can't just sit a ridge or sit a wide open area. Most of the time, you got to find the deer. Um, you got a short window of firearm season, so if you want to take full advantage of it, you got to be mobile. You got to be moving around, unless you're on a big chunk of private. But for most people on a 40 or an 80 or don't have any access to private land, so you got to make something happen. Myself personally, I'll hunt opening weekend on my family's land, and then after that, I got to work. I never take gun season off, so I'll work them 3 days before Thanksgiving, and then after work, I have a couple hours. I'll just kind of take my rifle and go for a walk. I, for the most part, use rifle season as archery scouting, I guess, or you can scout more aggressively because you have a gun with you. I mean, you jump a buck at 100 yards and he stops and turns around and looks at you. You can 9 times out of 10 you could take him. So I'll use gun season more for scouting, and I've had good success this year actually, just kind of still hunting and tracking deer.
Yeah. So why don't you break down You don't have to get like super, super in depth, but however you want to do it. Like, I feel like it'd be very applicable. And I know we'd talk about it at some point, but like your hunt from this year, was it during muzzleloader or was it during rifle season?
It was Thanksgiving Day
So
during
the end
rifle.
end of rifle season. So at that point, the deer have pretty much been through a week of pressure, and it's like the peak of the most pressured time of year, at least in that area. And
Yeah.
kind of rifle season's winding down to where they're not back to their normal patterns. They're holding pretty tight in those thick areas like we were talking about. So maybe just briefly talk about your hunt and kind of what went into that and how you kind of approached it with there being the amount of snow and the weather and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think we got all our snow Tuesday night into Wednesday. We ended up getting close to a foot of snow, and it was a wet snow. Everything was kind of hanging on the trees. And then right after the snow quit, it was windy, and a lot of the deer just weren't moving. So we ended up checking out a piece of public that I've never been on before. And we were a good 80 acres back before we even cut a deer track. But once we got back that far, it kind of got into more ridges and some open hardwoods. But in the bottom of all the ridges and stuff was real thick. And our game plan was either A, cut a fresh track, buck track. But for the most part, we were just kind of slowly working our way up, playing the wind, obviously, if we can, working our way up on top of these ridges, and then just kind of glassing the next ridge over and the bottoms and stuff, and working them until you either find deer or jump one or whatever. We got up on the biggest ridge there, and we were on top of it for probably 5 minutes. We were just going to start walking to the next ridge. I look over, and there's a buck working the top of the ridge, and I don't know if he was scent checking or what, because we were on the far south side and it was a straight north wind. And the ridge that he was on runs east west. So I don't know if he was trying to check that whole area because there's still does, you know, rifle season, you're kind of getting the tail end of the rut, but obviously there's still some late does and does that are coming back into estrus. But we ended up catching him. He's like 150 yards away on a ridge. And then I shot him. He was a nice 9-pointer. He was busted off. He would have been a 10. But that worked out really good. And then a friend of mine the day before, during the snowstorm, was doing the same thing, just kind of still hunting through, and shot a really big, would have been I think it scored 128, but it was busted off. And if he would have just added up the same side that matched all the broken stuff, it would have been right at 150. That was a nice 10-pointer. But just taking it slow, the deer are not going to want to get up in that real bad wind and snow. So you got, noise cover. You can walk. They're not going to hear you. If you can access the property and play the wind right, they're not going to smell you. And in my experience, in them real bad weather days, you can get 100 yards from them just in open country before they even want to get up. And if you're in thick stuff, you can get right on top of them before they even jump up.
So would you think do you think what factor would you think would be the driving factor for something like that not working out? Would it be like crusty snow where you're making a lot of noise, or like how would it have went if you how would it have changed, do you think, if it would have been like a little bit different conditions? Or do you think the conditions lined up just right, or is there certain things, certain conditions that have to line up for you think to be effective doing something like that, like still hunting one?
Certain conditions definitely line up better. Like we had wet snow, it wasn't crunchy. We had the wind, so you didn't have to worry about noise. If you do have crunchy snow, sometimes you only got so many days to hunt and you got to work with what you got. You might have to just slow down a little bit more. Obviously, if you can play the wind, no matter what, that you're always going to have some sort of wind. That's never going to change. Snow conditions, if it's crunchy, just take it real slow. Now, if it's cold, bitter cold, and wind, obviously, I think you're going to be more or less finding deer bedded down. Like the one during the snowstorm my friend shot, that was bedded down. The one I shot was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Snow quit. Snow was still soft. It was quite windy, yeah, but there was no snow. So I don't know if they were just getting back up on their feet a little bit after the storm. And it was sunny out also. So I'm assuming they were trying to just getting back up, moving around, trying to get feed. If you got crunchy snow, it's gonna be loud, but at the same time you gotta be in the game to even play the game.
Yeah, you just got to be out there. But one thing you talked about too is I know at least up north where the pressure is high during that rifle season, every single pull off, every single access point of every piece of ground has been someone in it, even if it's for one day. Thinking of it, depending on what the wind is, obviously. Like you talked about walking with the wind in your face when you're still hunting through a spot. That's the biggest thing. When it's nasty weather, maybe it's not as important. When it's really windy, really blowing, snowstorm,
Mm.
whatever. But accessing a spot from somewhere that someone wouldn't normally do it. Like if there's two parking lots on the south side of a property, maybe accessing from the west or the east if you can, or like going way one way, walking in a distance and coming in from the side to where you think deer are.
Yeah,
Just because they're so used to people just taking the easiest route, especially during rifle season, people just walk down logging roads or easy trails till they get to a spot and just sit
yeah,
where they're not used to someone coming in from a real janky way. You know, they're probably mostly set up watching or scent checking that main access, at least that
yeah.
time of year, from what I've seen. So just maybe if it's something like that, could be as simple as accessing from a weird way that most people don't could be the difference in deer staying, walking up on one. They're not expecting you to come from behind or from the side. If those other conditions, like you said, line up to where you're not making a bunch of noise.
Yeah, it's just a plus.
And
And I like,
it's tough without snow too. Like if there would have been no snow, it would have been a lot tougher on your guys' end. Maybe not for the quiet or the wind or any of that, but just the visual factor. You probably could pick those deer out a lot easier having a white backdrop versus if it was all brown and dead. It'd probably be pretty
right.
hard to spot a bedded buck in the timber.
You can even see like in the Wisconsin harvest numbers and kind of correlate it with years that we do have snow and don't have snow. It's pretty drastic actually how many more deer get taken when we do have snow, just for, in my opinion, is the visual factor. Because you go in the woods late fall when all the leaves are dropped. Yeah, it's open, but you can't see, everything blends in after a certain point. But as soon as that snow comes, you can see 6, 7, 800 yards in some of them chunks. Where otherwise deer just blend right in.
Yeah, I never really thought about that being the harvest numbers fluctuating with the snow, but I bet you it's probably is true if you look at the harvest numbers, especially during rifle season, the years that there's snow versus because I know a lot of people that aren't, are not what I would consider a great hunter, where they just hunt rifle season. In the amount of deer that they don't see because they're futzing around on their phone or doing all this stuff, like especially when the deer blends in a lot better, I could just see so many deer surviving just because people
Yeah.
that don't have that experience of picking out deer in the movement and aren't very observant, how that could affect that also.
Well, up here, so a lot of the public land up here, opening weekend is probably the biggest. I mean, you'll see people in chunks that you haven't seen people all year in, and then it kind of fades out. Monday, Tuesdays, people got to go back to work. So then I kind of put two and two together this year on the chunks we hunted. For one, they were chunks we've never been on, and we just more or less wanted to scout it. get a lay of the land more or less. But then also, in my mind, I was thinking the average landowner around isn't really gonna, if they own land next to public, 90% of the time they don't even go on the public because they think it's crap because everybody else hunts it. But they're still hunting, they're private. So all the pressure is coming from all the private around this chunk of public. And if there are deer there, the deer have to live somewhere. And we've seen a pile of deer on public this year. More deer on public than on my family's private. Granted, we're putting a lot more miles on walking and stuff like that. Just because deer don't know if it's public or private to begin with. They're going to live where they want to live. Middle of the week, if there's people hunting on the private, there's nobody on the public because those guys are back at work or whatever, or already got their deer. That's kind of what our thought process was this year is there's this huge chunk of land that nobody's even on. Why wouldn't their deer be there?
Yeah. And I feel like it's even more, I guess it even caters to that thought process more when you think about private that's the same type of terrain as the public that's adjacent. It'd be different if the private's primo private with good bedding set up like Don Higgins made this, like thousand, like the guys that know what they're doing as far as managing a piece of property. Like I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like say you have a chunk of 80 acres adjacent to another 80 acres and it's the exact same habitat type. It's essentially big woods and one
Yep.
of it's private, one of it's public. Pretty much saying that for that week, or at least opening weekend, there's going to be a bunch of guys in that private. Those deer are going to shift over to that public, where it might be a little different if it's different terrain types, if one is better suited for the deer versus not. But especially if they're pretty similar, I think that the public could be better for the reasons you stated, just because people are just aimlessly going in there and not really caring how they put pressure on deer. During rifle seasons, it's quite a bit different. I feel like people just aren't as conscious about
Yeah.
how they access their scent, stuff like that. They
Well,
kind of just
and
go in there and hunt.
up here, and I don't know how it is by you, there's not a lot of bow hunting pressure. There is, but there isn't, if that makes sense. Like I'll go in these chunks and I'll never see a hunter, but I'll find cell cameras everywhere. And
I think that's just part. I think that right there is something that is just with the times.
yeah,
I think with cell cameras being really, really affordable now and everybody can afford them, you know, they're just as cheap as SD card cameras, some of them. Like, why wouldn't you have one? To be honest with you, like
yeah,
why wouldn't you? It's real time intel, and I think people that's like one way that's like one of the big reasons why they got so popular is because they were sold on this idea that this is when they were more like expensive and not everybody could afford them, and there was only like a couple companies that made them, and they're very expensive.
for dollars.
Right, and that was their selling point. One of them was zero intrusion. That's why a lot of guys that own farms would have, they started out being a tool for guys that own these big farms and couldn't run a bunch of cameras. They didn't want to put pressure on the deer and be in the woods all the time. That was like their big selling point. Zero intrusion. Put it up and it's there all year. You never have to go check it.
Yeah,
And I think that's why you're seeing less guys actually real time out in the woods. You like maybe run into less while you're hunting and during the year because they're not out there until they start getting pictures of deer.
yeah, but in my opinion, by the time you get a picture of a deer, you're late. That
All
deer's
right.
already gone.
I agree with you. I agree with you, but I don't think a lot of people
You
haven't
can
figured that out yet.
you can run cell cameras a right way, but I think the vast majority are just hunting pictures, and yeah, you'll get success, but I feel like you could do a lot better running them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just trying to kind of go off of your point where you've seen a lot of less guys in the woods, but you see cell cameras. I see the same thing now. And I just think that's just where we're at today in
Yeah,
general and like just the space because I would say 80% of cameras that I've found the last 3 or 4 years have been cell cameras.
yeah. Well, you can get a 2-pack for $120, $100 on sale and stuff. So I mean,
I was
it's
seeing
also it's an insurance policy too, because not a lot of guys are gonna on public steal cell cameras because you can track them, or you might get your picture long gone before you even do anything.
I talked about this on another podcast also a couple ago about technology and hunting and just the way things are going. And this was like the day after I was still kind of hot about it. The day after I went and tried pulling my cameras I had soaking all year, and three out of the 3 or 4 out of the 5 that I went to pull were either cardless or cameraless and gone just in general. And it's because they weren't cell cameras, in my opinion. People got balls when they know they're not going to get caught.
Yeah,
You know, like if it was a cell camera and there's a chance that I know a lot of guys that don't have, like when I ever run cell cameras, I only get the picture sent to me once or twice a day because it helps me not try to chase camera pictures. That it's
yeah,
not really real time data per se. Like it's within 24 hours, but I'm smart enough to realize that 24 hours is not really that accurate. So I do that just for like a moral thing and like try to not to psych myself into playing that game. But
hmm
if there's that slight chance that that person's getting that picture sent to them in 30 seconds and they could live right down the road and they could catch you, that's big enough deterrence factor where it's almost forcing people's hand now. If they're going to run cameras on public, it's going to be a cell camera because, like you said, it's an insurance policy. It's probably not going to get stolen. So spend the extra $20 on a cell camera for it never to get touched.
and that's I have some SD card cameras that I still run just because they're cheap and I have them, so I might as well use them. But I've just went full cell camera, and I'll hunt, based off pictures. But a lot of times I'll be hunting that same property that camera's on, but I'm 700-800 yards away or on the complete other side of that camera. I'm hunting where I think the deer are versus where the deer were at midnight or some deer that ain't daylighting. You know, that's where I think people don't know how to use them. They'll get a picture of a buck at midnight and they'll just pound the hell out of that spot, thinking he's just going to show up. Well, there's a reason that deer is not coming through there during the middle of the day.
Yeah, and that just comes down to what features you're or what areas you're putting the cameras. You
Yeah,
know, like I don't hardly ever like I would never hunt over a scrape I have a cell camera on.
yeah,
Like I've tried it, it doesn't work. Like if from at least people make it seem like it works on TV, but that's a whole different rabbit hole. I'm not even going to attempt to go down. Like on
yeah,
public land, if you have a hot scrape and you have a cell camera over it, odds are one that another 5 or 10 guys know that scrape's there, and there's probably another camera on that same scrape, which I've seen before, or areas where, like I typically put them in pinch points, like rut time frame stuff, but those areas are not going to be good at certain times a year, certain times a day. Like there's way more factors you got to consider than just I'm getting his picture here. Well, he's somewhere else every single day that you're not getting him on camera. So if you're not really playing the odds, you think you are. It tricks your mind since you're getting that picture right now that's where you need to be, but it's really not that easy. And I don't know a lot of guys that are that dialed in with that system on public land to be able to hunt cell cameras and kill deer. I mean, it definitely helps, but
depends if you use them right. That's just like
yeah.
anything. I more or less it's inventoried, and then I'll hunt kind of based off of what I think is the best option.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a hot button topic that it'll be discussed forever until the next big thing comes out or they ban them or it's kind of going that way right now. It seems like they're just
I
starting to
would,
kind of get rid of them.
as much as it would kind of suck, I wouldn't mind if they banned them.
Yeah, it's one of those things where as long as it's legal, I'm going to take advantage of it, but I'm not going to be the one crying when they do.
No,
because I
because
realize how like it's for the betterment of the sport in general, if
Mhm.
probably. So
I think you'd see it would suck on the point of you would probably lose a lot of hunters. License sales stuff will go down because a lot of guys want that reassurance of a deer there.
yeah,
But
they don't want to tell people that they have zero pictures on a piece of property and they're hunting it. They got to show I'm hunting here because I got this picture. They pull out their phone and show you the big buck they got on camera. It's like a reassurance thing.
yeah, and I think the guys that kind of know how to hunt sign and can tell what a mature buck track looks like and what a mature buck rub looks like. I think those guys would be on cloud nine if they got rid of if there was no pressure in the woods again.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, I'm very torn. Like, I don't want to get too far on the cell camera thing, but like, I don't know that would go that way. Like, I think it would definitely change things, but like the no people, if they banned them, I don't know that it's going to have less people in the woods because I think it's kind of trying to turn the other way to where there's a lot more guys now that want to just go absolute minimalist now, like, and just like buck the system. Like, it's going this way. We want to be the people that change it for the better. So there's all these people now that are coming into it new that want to just be super minimalist, very like traditional, that they're going to do all the scouting they can and be in the woods all the time. You might have a lot more of those people always hunting and always being in the woods because they're not chasing a picture. They need to figure it out. They need to be out in the woods versus those, like I said, I think a lot of guys just put the camera out there and they don't hunt unless they're getting pictures.
Oh yeah,
So I
there's
think cell
definitely
cameras actually eliminate the pressure and people being out in the woods for the most part.
yeah,
So I don't know. That's just like a different perspective I thought about. Like, I don't know. I really, unless it happens, I really don't know how it's going to go.
yeah. Because I guess from that point, a lot of the chunks that I spend a lot of time on do have a lot of cell cameras in, and the deer are there. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. This year, I had two different mature bucks. I didn't get a shot at either of them, but I had two mature bucks run past me during the rut this year. And it was I've hunted that piece before, but not in the area I was in. Kind of just hung in the dark and sat there. And like before it was shooting light, I had two bucks run past me. And after that morning hunt, I got down and walked around, kind of figure out kind of what was around me if I wanted to adjust for the evening or whatever. And I could, I was within bow range of three different cell cameras, not of my own, where I was sitting, and not one of them I don't think got a picture of those two bucks. So I mean, there's that whole thing too that they really don't catch as much as you think.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Your
I don't
point of
know.
view makes a little more sense maybe than mine.
I mean,
Keep
I'm
cell
no,
cameras in the woods.
yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts, but trying to think what else we can kind of talk about to wrap up the whole post rifle season, late season thing. Because I don't, like I said, I'm no expert, so like I'm not looking to tell people what they should or shouldn't do. I'm just kind of throwing out the things that I've kind of seen and what I kind of want to get better at, just to kind of hear, your perspective's different from mine. I'm sure someone else out there has a different perspective yet, and everybody's kind of situation is different, so it's hard to kind of take one thing for you know set in
For what?
stone that this is the way you got to do it.
Yeah,
But I think if we just outline what we kind of talked about too, just like the bullet points, like the most important things, like late season for me, I think for somebody who wants to get better this time of year is whether you have your tag filled or not, whether it's going to pull your cameras, like my system late season, which I need to figure out something else just because I feel like it hasn't really translated too much, is at the bare minimum, when you're going to pull your cameras at the end of the year, whether it's this time of year or even later, just like spend a little bit more time. Like, don't just grab your camera and walk the same trail you did out. What I'll do is I'll go in probably as straight line as I can, the easiest route for me to go grab the camera. Maybe I check the camera right there while I'm there so I can maybe scout off of that. Usually I don't. What I'll do at the bare minimum is grab the camera and I'll do a big loop and I'll take a different access back to my truck than I would have gone in and kind of just like scout that area, or we'll go into a different area that I have never been in that area and just take a different route out, kind of scout my way out. And at the bare minimum, that just kind of, I'm looking at new ground. Maybe I stumble upon something, maybe I don't. There's not really much thought in, I want to check out this area and this area on my way out. I kind of just go out a different way. And I think that's like been a kind of valuable, and it's translated to hunting that area differently the next year. But I guess it hasn't necessarily translated to, if I hunt this late season, this is how I'd hunt it.
Yeah, I guess I've never like late season. Like if I'm gonna go grab cameras, I'll kind of do the same thing that you're talking about. I'll kind of just check out stuff I didn't check out before since I'm already in the woods. And then not necessarily late season hunting related, more kind of late season scouting. A lot of them areas, and it's late season scouting just because of the season, but it's more rut October knowledge I'm trying to gain is I'll go into a lot of them areas that I hunted like the outskirts of, not trying to go in there during prime bow season, but I'll walk in there late season to kind of see if, there are rubs in there, there are buck beds in there. Was there bucks in there that I was hunting, trying to put them puzzle pieces together to kind of validate my hunch of why I wanted to sit there. Because it's bow season, I didn't want to go in there and bump something out of there. But I think late season, like if I threw a dart at a board on a map and I had to break down this 100-acre chunk of land that had a swamp, it had a ridge, it had hardwoods, it had all these different things. I think what I would more or less key on is if you're in the north and it's cold, I would look for thermal cover. A south-facing slope, something with sun. And then obviously still checking edges. If you have a hardwood swamp meet, check them edges if you're going to walk and try to scout the whole thing. That's probably my first thing. And if you have snow, obviously that's going to help. That'll validate that there are deer there just based off tracks. But up here, I don't know how it is down south. I don't know if the deer herd up down south. Up here, you're either in them or you're not. And I think the cold, in my opinion, I think the cold and staying warm factors more than food, in my opinion, because a deer can break down, woody browse and stuff like that. So I think they always have access to food. It might not be the best source of food, but I think staying warm and out of the weather is more important in my experience.
Yeah. And I would just second with, if I was like, mine approach would probably be pretty similar, but yeah, I'd just be looking at thick areas, a spot that has thick areas, or find the thickest area on a piece if you only have one to work with. And that'd be number one. And like you said, there's not always the most preferred food source. Try to find the best one you can. But if you're looking at one specific area, they're going to have to make whatever the best one in that area work. It might not be the best, but they can make do with very little. And so it'd just be trying to find those thick areas and then approaching that thick area and thinking about your access and making sure your access is different than what they are normally used to or what they're expecting. That's been like my one thing that the last few years I really keyed in on is, once I kind of have figured out where I want to go, what I want to do, and have like my set in stone plan, then I like can break it down completely separately about what's my access. And then I like make a completely different plan based off of one or two different accesses of how I'd get to that spot I know I need to be. And I feel like that's led to a lot of encounters and success that I normally wouldn't have if I didn't pay as much attention to access. So I feel like those keying in on a thick area that possibly has the browse they need or could make do, and then really thinking what how you get there.
Yeah.
And like you said, with snow, you're gonna know if they're there or not, and you're gonna know. And then it's a whole different thing that I'll have to, I'd like to get someone on to talk about that's very experienced in tracking and talk more about it because I don't want to speak on it too much. But like, you can tell the difference between a buck track and a doe track and a mature buck track. Like, that's another thing to consider. Like, you can validate things pretty easily with snow versus not. So that like kind of changes your game plan that way. It would, at least for
Yeah.
me, because not everybody has snow, but it definitely helps having snow when if you're talking the still hunting approach and just if you're trying to quickly find deer, just driving roads and cutting a track. Because that's would be like the most efficient way I could see if you're in big woods, especially up north, and we have snow. We just drive roads until you cut a track and follow that thing, and hopefully it meets up with a bunch more or where their destination is. That's what my approach would be later in the year if we had snow.
Yeah. And another thing I took note of is on both the deer that I was with during like the still hunting stuff is after we got them, obviously, is kind of look around and see why they were there. Deer is a mature buck isn't going to do anything stupid. There's a reason for, in my opinion, doing that for a reason. So then trying to kind of take back and to see what maybe the land features were. Was there food around? If you have snow, was he on a doe track? You know, kind of gain knowledge that way after the fact.
Just asking yourself why.
Yeah, I think you can answer a lot of your own questions when you're in the moment and you ask yourself why. I feel like it's hunting is as hard as you. I think a lot of people, me and you both, very much make it way harder than it needs to be. And it's
Yeah,
this the
yeah.
it's the dumb stuff. Like the night I shot my buck with a bull, I sent in the group chat, I said, "This is the dumbest tree, the dumbest spot I've ever been in." And it was like a half hour later.
Yeah. Like if you've seen our text threads throughout the season and how they gradually go from opening day being so optimistic to by, that 10th of November when no one's killed one yet. And just like the pessimistic, like just down on yourself negativity and just or like, let's say we have a day off to hunt, right? One day a week. And then like we send in the group chat, like, oh, we're pretty like our group of our 4 or 5 friends will send in like a screenshot of like the map. Like I want to be here tomorrow and this is why. And we're like looking for validation from everybody that that's a good idea versus not a good idea. I do this different. Personally, I like that just to get
Mhm.
second opinions because it makes yourself feel like, hey, you kind of got it. You're doing the best thing,
Yeah.
that you could
And,
possibly be doing.
and
And
especially, if you're looking at a piece of property and there's certain terrain on and you know by you there's a lot more hill country. By me it's flat, but you do run into hill country. So say if I'm checking out a chunk of land that's more hill country related, getting your guys' knowledge from hunting hill country a lot more than I do is very beneficial because I might try to hunt based off of flatland features where they're not necessarily using flatland features.
I don't know where I was going with that whole text thread thing. I don't know how what were we talking about prior?
Negativity, just winging stuff.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, just like I know we were talking about something, and I had a thought that I was gonna make a point when we were talking about.
Making hunting harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, because in the grand scheme of things, you got to hunt your own hunt. You want to get something more out of it than maybe you do or whoever else does. But you just need to you just need to do what you know you need to do personally, because you have more experience than I have in certain areas and vice versa, to where it's nice to get your buddy's opinion or someone else's opinion, but don't take what they say verbatim and throw out everything you know is right, you know? Like it's I don't know if that's where I was going with it, but I know we were kind of talking about that, and then you talked about how, like, the night that you shot your buck, you weren't in ideal conditions, not a great tree, whatever. And then I was going to talk about too, like the morning I shot my buck, I'm on the phone. I'm on the phone with you guys talking about how shitty my season's been, that I need to like just quit for the year. And then
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes later, you got a deer dead,
Mm-hmm.
like your season can switch just like that.
Yeah.
And
Well, and looking back on the one I shot, after the fact, it all made sense why the deer came through there. I mean,
that's what we were talking about. Now that light bulb went off for me. We were talking about how you just got to ask yourself why when something happens, you know what I mean? Like whether you find a piece of sign that you like when you're scouting, or find deer in a certain area, or kill a deer, and just like taking a step back and asking yourself, why did this happen like this? And
mhm.
and at least take one thing away from that. This happened for this reason, and validate that. Yeah. I think we'll wrap that one up here, I think. Well, good luck to everybody out there still grinding away. Our southern folk, if we have any listening, still got a little bit of season left, but up here in the north, we're pretty well done and have been done for a while. Appreciate you hopping on, Jesse. Appreciate everybody listening. And that's all for this episode.